Begin today the Gemara on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, 5 lines up from the bottom of the Yamud. Gufe, going back to the statement that was mentioned before regarding washing the hands and feet from the kir in the Beis Hamikdash every day. Amar Rabbi Yosi bar Rab Chanina kol kir she'ein bo kidei lekadesh arba kayanim, a kir that does not have enough water in it that you could wash hands and feet for 4 kayanim, ein mekatshim bay. You cannot wash your hands and feet from it. This is the minimum amount of water that has to be in it. Just like, for example, by a mikveh, there's the minimum amount of water for the mikveh, has to be 40 saw, the minimum that the body of a person can immerse in it. You have for netilas yadayim, if you're washing your hands, it has to be in a vessel that has a revius. So over here, for the kiyar, it has to be a minimum amount of water, enough for 4 people to wash their hands and feet. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, "V'rachatzu mimenu Moshe v'Aaron ubanav v'gomer." Moshe and Aaron, this is in the Shivas Yimei Miluim, so Moshe was serving as a Kayin. So Moshe and Aaron and his 2 sons, which are Elazar and Isamar, washed their hands from the Kiyar. The Pasuk is mentioning the details of who washed their hands to let you know that this is the minimum amount of water that has to be inside the Kiyar. Meisvei, so the question is asked on this from a Braisa. It says, Kol ha'kelim mekachin, from all vessels in the Beis HaMikdash. You can wash your hands and feet from the water in it, bein sheyesh ben revius, whether these vessels have a revius in it, bein she'en ben revius, or even if it has less than a revius. That's actually less than the amount necessary for netilas yadayim, which means that Chachamim were more stringent with their takana by netilas yadayim that it has to be at least a revius, but over here by the kir, which is a mitzvah min hatayra for the kainim to wash their hands and feet, it could be even less than a revius. So how can we say that it has to be amount for 4 people? As long as it's a kli shadis, a vessel that's used in the karbanis in the Beis Hamikdash, that's any amount is fine. And it's the Gemara Amar of Ade Bar Ache or Bar Ava, another girsa, that over here we're not talking about a vessel that stands alone and has in it less than a revius. The case is b'kedeyach b'toichai, he drills a hole inside of the kiyar, and he sticks this small vessel inside the kir, which is sort of half inside and half outside, and the water that's coming out of the kir now through this vessel that's stuck into this hole is flowing through this vessel, and from there the Kayanim are washing their hands and feet. That's the case. So they're washing from this vessel, not mamish directly from the kir itself. But it's only when this vessel that has less than a revius in it is sort of connected to the kir itself. But if it wouldn't be connected, it would not be good because it has too little water in it.
And why would you add it?
Why would someone do this? It's a good question. But this is the case. That's the only kind of a case when less than a revius in this vessel would be okay. But how are we talking about washing hands and feet of the kainim when it's not done directly from the kir itself? But the Torah says, the pasuk we just quoted, that you wash from it, from the kir, not from any other vessel, it seems. Answers the Gemara, no, there's an extra word here. It says yirchatzu. In the next pasuk after this, it says again the term yirchatzu, which is an extra word. The pasuk begins to say, v'rochatzu mimenu Moshe v'Aaron, and then it goes on to say, when they come into the oil of Moed b'karvasam ala mizbeach, it doesn't have to say again yirchatzu. It just said v'rochatzu. What's this extra word saying? L'rabbis klishadis. It comes to add that you could wash your hands even from another vessel in the Beis Hamikdash. If that's the case, that we have an extra word of yirchatzu to say that it doesn't have to be from the kir itself, so then kli chayil nami. How do you know that this is only from a kli shadis in the Beis Hamikdash? Maybe any mundane vessel could be used with the water inside to wash your hands and feet, just like we wash our hands in the morning. Maybe you can use any vessel to wash your hands and feet from it. Amar Abaye, so Abaye answers, Kli chayil motzes amris, that the kayin can wash his hands from a regular vessel, that you can't say. And the reason is mikal v'chaymer, because we learn from a kal v'chaymer that this is not going to qualify. And the kal v'chaymer is mikanoi, from the base of the kir. So apparently the base of the kir, there's different shittas exactly how the base was made, but the base of the kir apparently also has an interior that you can place water inside of it and then theoretically wash your hands from the base of the kir, even if not from the kir itself. But now regarding the base of the kir, you cannot wash your hands from it. As the Gemara is going to bring soon the source. And if that's the case, we have a kal v'chaymer. If when it comes to the base of the kir, that's anointed to be a holy vessel, just like the kir itself, but nevertheless, the kohen cannot wash his hands and feet from it, kli chayil. just any regular vessel, that's not anointed to be holy together with the kir. So isn't that shouldn't it be the same din? You cannot wash your hands and feet from it. That's the kal v'chomer. Well, the Gemara says, now what's the source for this? V'kanoi minolon. How do we know that if you fill the base of the kir with water and you want to wash from it, how do you know that that will not qualify? Tanya, as we learned in the Braisa, Rabbi Yudah said, Yachol yehei kanoi mekadesh kederech shakir mekadesh. You would think that you could wash your hands and feet from the base of the kir, just like you could wash from the kir itself. Talmud Loimar, the pasuk when it describes making the kir, it says vasisa kir nechoshes. The kir is going to be from copper, and v'kanoi nechoshes, and the base is also from copper. Now it says here twice copper. It wasn't necessary for the Torah to spell out that both the kir and its base should be from copper. If it would just say kir and kanoi, I would know that they're both from the choshes. It says it in the same pasuk, and I would compare them. So why is it adding and saying by both that they're made from copper? Because it's coming to say l'nechoshes ekashtiv, that they're only the same in the sense that they're both made from the same material, copper. But they're not compared in any other way. Meaning, from here we see that the kir is where you wash your hands from it, but the kanoi is not compared to the kir itself. You cannot wash your hands from the base of the kir. So therefore we have a kal v'chomer. If you can't wash your hands from the base of the kir, you can't just use any mundane vessel for the kohen to wash his hands and feet from it. So, but Marzutra Berei Rav Mari says to Ravina that this kal v'chomer, you can refute it, because I can tell you mala kanoi, the reason why the kanoi, the base, you cannot wash your hands from it, because she'ein asi l'toichai. It's not made to use the interior of this base for filling it with liquid, with water. It's made as a base, and according to some opinions, it has an interior, but it's turned upside down. And on top of this upside down base is where you build the kir on it, the actual the kir that's above it. So it's b'chlal not made for the interior to be used to fill with water, and therefore you cannot wash your hands and feet from it. However, when it comes to any regular vessel, even though it's not anointed, it's not a holy vessel, but nevertheless it's a vessel that's made to fill the interior with water with it. So maybe here it will qualify for the kohanim to wash their hands and feet. So you can't compare, you can't learn with a kal v'chomer from the base of the vessel that cannot be used. So therefore the Gemara goes back.
The kir had spigots.
Correct. That's on the kir itself. Yeah.
So it's on the kir itself. So if it's at the base, there was a spigot at the base also?
No, but let's
how
say
do you get to the water?
So it's not so practical what we're speaking about here, but theoretically, if you would remove the top of the kir from the bottom, and then you would take the base and you would pour without a spigot. You would pour from it, so that would not qualify. But the Gemara says that that's because it wasn't made to hold water. But a regular vessel that's made to contain water in it, maybe that would qualify. So therefore the Gemara goes back to the drasha that it said before. Ela mimenu. When the pasuk says the word mimenu, that you're washing from the kir itself, that's lemutik lichayil. It comes to exclude that you cannot wash from any regular vessel. Ihachi, but if we're going back to that word mimenu, klisharis nami, why wouldn't it also exclude that you can't wash from any other klisharis that's not the kir itself? So, but the answer is that we had the other word, harabi rachmana yirchatzu. The Torah says the extra word yirchatzu, that the kohen washes his hands. That means that you can wash from any klisharis, as long as it's a holy keli klisharis. Now, Mara Isa, what is it that you see that you're excluding the klichayil and you're adding and you're saying that you could wash from a klisharis? Maybe it should be the other way around. Even though it's hard to understand why I would think it's the other way around, but the Gemara asks this as a question. And the Gemara answers that, no, the svar is simple. Zeh ton meshicha kamayu. The klisharis, any other holy vessel in the Beis HaMikdash, has to be anointed to become a klisharis, just like the kir itself. And therefore it's compared to the kir in that sense, and therefore you could wash your hands and feet from any other klisharis. And we learned that from the word yirchatzu. But v'zeh ein tom meshicha kamayu. However, any other klichayil is not being anointed like the kir. Therefore, the kohen, we exclude from the word mimena that the kohen cannot wash his hands from it. Okay, now the Gemara discusses other details about washing hands and feet, and here the discussion is regarding what kind of a water are we using in this kir. So there's two different discussions about this. Let's see. Amar Reish Lakish says, Kol mashlim lemei mikveh, any kind of waters that could be used to complete the waters of the mikveh, meaning it's not what the waters of the mikveh consists of. There is the water of the mikveh, but then this is other kind of liquids or waters that is going to complete the waters of the mikveh. This is in the Mishnah in Masechta Mikvahs. It speaks about that there are certain liquids that will passel the mikveh. Okay, but then there's certain liquids that are mylin v'loy paislin, meaning that they will complete the mikveh for the amount of 40 saw and they will not passel the mikveh. So Rashi here, the Gemara here, doesn't bring what those liquids are, but there's a list here that the Mishnah says. For example, it says snow, and then the other one that the Gemara will bring up soon is like muddy water, dirty muddy water. It's still very liquidy, liquidy enough that therefore it won't qualify itself as a mikveh, but it could be mashlim, the amount that's needed for the mikveh. So those kinds of waters, mashlim to make here. It could also complete the amount that's needed for the waters of the mikveh. As we said before, as the minimum shear that you need to wash 4 kainim for it, it could be mashlim. However, l'devius ain't a mashlim. But for the minimum amount that's needed in your cup or in the kvart that you wash your hands with it, which is a revius, for this it will not be mashlim. These kinds of waters will not be mashlim for that revius for washing your hands. So the Gemara explains, what are we talking about here? Lamuti mai, what are we excluding? In other words, what waters are we making a distinction between the mikveh and the kir on one hand, and on the other hand, the revius needed for Natilas Yadayim, where it will not qualify? If you're going to say lemute tit hanoduk, are we speaking about this example that's mentioned there in the Mishnah in Mikvahs, this liquidy cement or the liquidy water, which is dirty with cement or with earth, what?
Mud.
With mud, that is, yeah, mud. Thank you. And here in our Gemara it says the word nadik. Nadik literally means that it's very thin, meaning it's still liquidy. In the Mishnah there it says naraik, which means it's still liquidy. If that's if that's what we're talking about over here, so then the question is, why are we making a distinction between the mikveh and the water that we're using to wash one's hands in Natilas Yadayim? Because the rule here is as follows. Hey chidami, what are we speaking about? If this is water that's muddy, but a cow will still bow or will still bend down and drink from it, so then I fill the revius nami. The halacha in such a case is that even for the revius necessary to wash from Natilas Yadayim, this will qualify. Rashi here brings the Mishnah in Chulin that says this. Rashi doesn't quote Mamish the Gemara there in Chulin, but this is where it comes from. It's the Gemara in Chulin, and it's a Mishnah also Masechta Yadayim, where it says that this is what we use as the what tells us, the measuring stick to tell us if it's still good or not. As long as we know that the cow would still drink from this water, it could actually be used even for the waters to wash Natilas Yadayim. So if so, there's no distinction between the mikveh and the water for the revius for Natilas Yadayim. But if this muddy water is thick enough that the cow will not even drink from it, so then I fill a mikveh nami mashlim. So that's thick muddy water. That's not titanoduk. That's not liquidy. That's thick. Yes. And then even for the mikveh, it will not qualify. So here we're making a distinction between the mikveh and the revius. What case is this? So Ella, it would seem the case is as follows. We're making an exclusion, meaning we're making a distinction between the mikveh and the water for Natilas Yadayim of these yavchushin adumin. These are these kinds of insects that Rashi says they're insects that have no wings, that grow and are in the water, and they're red apparently. And so these insects, they could be mashlim to the amount that you need for a mikveh, but they cannot be mashlim for the amount that's needed for the revius to wash your hands for Natilas Yadayim. That's what we're talking about, and it's regarding these insects that we're saying that just like it's mashlim for the mikveh, it could be mashlim for the kiyar, but not for what's needed for Natilas Yadayim. Okay, so this is a mikveh that's a pretty dirty mikveh. Okay, so if you think that this is dirty, let's look what the Gemara says now. But if that's the case, if we're talking about these yavchushin adumen, then afila be'inayu nami. If you have an area which is not at all water, it's just a bunch of these insects to the amount that this is what makes up the entire mikveh, and that's what the person is immersing in, that would actually be kosher. As the Gemara brings a source for this in a second. But the point the Gemara is asking, Rish Lakish is trying to make a distinction between the mikveh and what you use to wash Natilas Yadayim, and he says the term mashlim. what's going to be mashlim. But this is not something which is mashlim. These yavchushin, these insects, they can be a mikveh for themselves, even without any water. Exactly how a person is going to table in this, it's not pleasant exactly how this is going to work. But the fact is that they have the halachim mamish like water themselves. Where do we see this? The Tanya says in a brayser, Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, Kol shetchilas briyasei min hamayim, anything that is born and created from the water, matbilim by, you could table in it like water itself. The point is that the halacha of these insects that are born in the water itself, they're mamish to have the halacha like actual water itself.
So you can argue that if you have a mikvah that's less than 40 so, and you put fish in it, so the fish can be mashed from the 40
maybe,
so.
perhaps.
They're
But
also
fish,
born in water.
They're not born from the water, though. Apparently, it's a little bit different. Now, here, the Gemara says a similar thing regarding one part of the fish. Let's see. I don't know if you could say that about fish b'chlal. They're not mamish born from the water. Here it's mashma has to be briyasei min hamayim, not only in the water but min hamayim, whatever that means. It's like mamish considered to be part of the water itself.
What's called shchilato briyato? What's the beginning?
It's created from the water mamish. It's created from the water. The Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, a similar thing. Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi says matbilin be'einai shel dog. Theoretically, or maybe not even theoretically, you have a very large fish, and this large fish it has an eye, and the eye has a fatty part to the existence of the eye. If you take this fish out of the water, and then you remove the eye from the socket, and there's still that fatty part of the eye that's there, and if it's large enough to taivel inside of it, you can taivel in that fatty part in the eye of the fish. Why? Because that fatty part of the fish is something that's created from the water, similar to these yavchushim, and therefore you can taivel in this. So therefore, the question is, this cannot be what Ish Lakish was talking about when he was making a distinction between the mikveh and the water from the Tilis Yadayim, because these are not things that are mashlim. These are things that are actually qualified for themselves to be as a mikveh. So Amar Rav Papa, therefore Rav Papa explains, what was Ish Lakish speaking about? L'me'ute nosan sa v'notal sa. He's speaking about a case where you have a mikveh where you put a saw in and you took a saw out. What is this talking about? So the Mishnah says the following halacha: Mikveh sheyesh by mem sa mechovanais. If you have a mikveh that has the exact minimum amount that's needed for the mikveh to be kosher, 40 saw of water. Nosan saw. So now the person went and he added a saw into the mikveh, not from water. There's different kind of thing that Rashi here says. For example, juice. He took orange juice and poured it into this mikveh that has the exact amount of 40 saw in it, and then v'notal saw. He removed from that same amount of juice that he poured into the mikveh, he removed a saw from the mikveh now. Harezeh kosher. It's going to be kosher. Okay, now he can continue doing this. How much? How far? You can continue adding more juice and taking out water, adding more and taking out. How much can a person go and do this? You can do this adding a saw of other liquids and then removing from the mikveh until the majority of the mikveh. If the majority of the mikveh is going to be from the juices that you added, then it's going to be a problem. But as long as it's not the majority, even up to half of juice and half water, it's going to be kosher. This is the halacha regarding the mikveh, which is mashlim, the mikveh to be kosher. So it's this halacha that it's saying that applies to a mikveh, and similar to a kir as well, that if you have the minimum amount in the kir, water for 4 kayanim, and then you poured in juice and you took out water, that it's going to be kosher. But by Netilas Yadayim, you don't say that. If you have the minimum amount of revius that's needed of water and your cup to wash your hands, and you take out a little bit and you add in juice instead, over there it's actually not going to be kosher. That's what Rish Lakish was speaking about.
Is the kinder is connected to a mikveh?
The what? What's connected?
The kinder, no?
The Tilis Yadayim.
No.
Connected to a
No. It was they submerged it into a mayan overnight. Yeah. That's what we learned about in the Gemara before, but it's not connected. No, it's on the.
Every day you have to fill up with water.
However often they needed to, but they would submerge it overnight in a mayan, in a wellspring, but it wasn't connected. Amar Rav Papa. Now Rav Papa said as follows: In kidduch boy, if a person goes and drills a hole inside a mikveh, and now he has a little bit of water that comes out of the mikveh into this hole, revius, and there's just a revius from this mikveh, and that revius of water that's there from this mikveh is not anymore connected to the mikveh itself. And we're talking over here, according to one opinion, there's two pshatim how to learn this Gemara, but according to one opinion, we're talking over here about this mikveh that we just spoke about, where he added juice, then he took out water from it, and now he drilled a hole and he has a little bit of this mikveh that's just a revius. Matbilim by, you could toivel in this, machtin, vitzinitis, little pins and tzinitis, little forks. Why is this? Even though usually a mikveh has to have the amount of 40 saw, that's the minimum size of a mikveh, that size of 40 saw is only midrabanan in order for a person to toivel in it. But really minatayre, to toivel these very little utensils, it's and even these little things like a little fork, it's even a revius would be fine. And it will be, in this case, it's coming from a kosher mikveh, and even if it's coming from this mikveh, where you took out a saw of water and you added a saw of juice, it'll be kosher to toivel, and even if it's in this small amount of a revius. Not only in this larger amount of 40 saw is this natal saw and nasal saw kosher, even this little amount. This water now that you have of a revius is coming from a kosher mikveh, and minatayre, this amount of a revius qualifies for these little utensils to toivel in it, so therefore you can toivel in this little amount of water that came from the kosher mikveh, even if it's now disconnected from the mikveh.
Just for kelim, though, right?
Yeah, for little kelim, that is. Okay, going back now to the kiyar, another halacha that was said regarding the waters that qualify for the kiyar. Amar Rab Yirmiyah, Amar Reish Lakish, mei mikveh, ksherim lemei kiyar. For the waters of the kiyar, you can use waters from a mikveh to fill the kiyar with it.
That's it.
Meaning it doesn't have to be the waters from a mayan, from a wellspring, which is what they had below the Azara. And they submerged it in it. You can use the waters of a mikveh for the waters of the kiyar. Says the Gemara, Lamemra, shall we say, the mayim chayim ninu, that does not have to be mayim chayim, living waters, which means waters that are coming from a wellspring that's connected to its source in the ground. But vatanya, and a brayso, we learned something that seems to imply that the waters of the kiyar does have to be waters from a mayan. Because it says as follows, B'mayim. The pasuk says in waters. What is this pasuk talking about? It's talking about the carbon oila, that they would take the intestines of the carbon, and before they would burn it on the mizbeach, it would be washed off in water. That's what it says in the pasuk. V'kerev v'krayim yirchatz b'mayim. And then you burn it on the mizbeach. So now, what kind of waters do you have to wash it? So the brayso says v'loy b'yayin. It can't be washed off with wine. B'mayim and v'loy b'mazik. It also can't be washed with water that's mixed with wine. B'mayim, and when it says water, it means l'rabes shar mayim. You could use any kind of water. V'kal v'chaymer l'mei kiyar. And definitely, a kal v'chaymer, you can use the waters of the kiyar. Now, when it says a kal v'chaymer, you can definitely use the waters of the kiyar. My kal v'chaymer l'mei kiyar. Why is the waters of the kiyar on a higher level of quality that we're making a kal v'chaymer? To say that it's definitely going to be usable to wash off the karbanis. So, don't you think the reason it's a kal v'chaymer because the mayim chayim, the waters of the kiyar is in a higher level of quality because this is water that comes from a wellspring, not just plain water that's coming from a mikveh. Says the Gemara, it's not necessarily the case. Rather, the Kaddish. The advantage that there is to the waters in the kiyar is the fact that this is waters that has been sanctified in a klisharis in the kiyar. And therefore, this is the kal v'chaymer, that this is waters that can be used to wash off the carbon. The fact that it's been sanctified in the kiyar, that's an advantage in the quality of this water to wash off with it. But not necessarily should it be an advantage at all, because Vatana the Beis Shmuel has taught. Rashi says he doesn't know exactly on what Shmuel taught this. Taisus brings that this was taught in Teres Kainim regarding this subject we're speaking about, the waters to wash off the karbanis. That when it says mayim, what does it mean? Mayim she'en lem shem levoy. It has to be waters that don't have an added name to it. For example, Taisus here brings, if you have waters that made tusim, waters, what's tusim? Tusim, I think, is strawberries or something like that. If you have waters that has another name to it because it's waters of something else, so then it's not water. It can't have another name. And therefore, the Brayso there says, or Shmuel said, Yatsu mei kir, sheyesh lem shem levoy. Therefore, the waters of the kir that has an added name to it, it cannot be used. So that shows that the waters of the kiyar, because it's called waters of the kiyar, waters that has been sanctified in the kiyar, that's not an advantage. So Elamai, we're not talking about the actual waters in the kiyar. The actual waters in the kiyar cannot be used. We're talking about waters that would qualify for the kiyar. And what is that? So Elalav, Duru'uyim lemei kiyar. This brayso that's saying a kal v'chaymer, that you can use the waters of the kiyar to wash the karbanis. It's not talking about the water of the kiyar, but mayim chayim. So that's the water that is on a higher level of quality that could definitely be used to wash the karbanis. So if so, we go back to the point that Gemara proved before. Alma mayim chayim nino. So we see from here that the waters that's fit to be used for the kir is not plain water or water from a mikveh. It's mayim chaim, water that comes from a wellspring that's in the ground. So this is proof against what Reish Lakish said. You could even use waters of a mikveh. Says the Gemara Tanoi. This is a machlokes Tanoim. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Mei kiyah," the water of the kiyah. Rabbi Shmuel leimer mei mayim. Rabbi Shmuel says the water of the kiyah has to come from a wellspring. However, Chachamim say, "Shar mei mesein." Other waters as well, waters from a mikveh, could also be used to fill the kiyah with it, and that will qualify for the waters of the kiyah. Okay, this completes the whole sugi here of the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, the Kohen washing their hands and feet every day in the Beis HaMikdash. We go back now to the Mishnah in the beginning of the Perek, where it discussed the various different people that if they do the Aveda, they passel the carbon. So it said in the Mishnah, the Odel. Odel is one that did not have a bris, so he will passel the carbon as well. Rashi says the case is, this is a Kohen that cannot do a bris because his brothers passed away from a bris. But over here, Taisa says, Rabbeinu Tam said that it has to be speaking about a person that doesn't want to do a bris. He could, but he doesn't want. So Minolam, what's the source of this? Rav Chisda said, this halacha, we don't see it clearly in a pasuk, but midivri Yecheskel ben Buzi lamadnu, but we see it in the pasuk in Yecheskel, where it says, Kol ben necha oral lev oral basa, a ben necha. So he has a clogged heart, or oral basa, does not have a bris. Lo yavi al mikdashi, should not come to the Beis HaMikdash to do the aveda. So Yecheskel said this, but we know there's already a tradition from before, Allah Moshe Sinai, that this is going to passel the karbanis, and Yecheskel said it clearly. Ominol and the Machali Aveda, so it says he shouldn't come to do the Aveda. How do we know that if the Aveda was done through one without a bris, that it will passel the Aveda? Because the Chsiv, the pasuk there before says, Ba'aviyachem b'neinecha arle lev arle basa liz b'mikdashi, that if he enters into the Beis HaMikdash, l'chalel es beisi, he desecrates my home, which means he's mechalel, he passels the carbon. Now, Tana Rabbanon and Abraisi, we learned it explains better the terms in this pasuk when it says ben nechar. So ben nechar usually means a guy. So Yachol Benecha Mamish. Maybe here all it's coming to say is that a guy cannot do the Aveda in the Beis HaMikdash. Talmud Loima Adol Leiv. But then the pasuk goes on to spell out that who's the Ben Nechar, the Adol Leiv. Adol Leiv means the person that his heart is closed and he's not doing Torah mitzvahs properly. He's a Yid, which is a Rasha, but it doesn't refer to a guy. So what does the term ben necha in this context mean? His actions, his behavior is strange. He's estranged from his Father in heaven. So from here I see that one that is estranged from his Father in heaven. Some say this means that he's like a mumar. He's dropped Yiddishkeit altogether. He serves Avodah Zarah. There's different interpretations exactly what this means, but it's someone that is, in his behavior, he's not keeping Torah mitzvahs, he's estranged to his Father in heaven. So I would think that it means only such an individual. Oral basar minayin, one that is oral basar, he does not have a bris. How do I know that he can't do the Aveda? Talmud loymar v'oral basar. So the pasuk says the oral leiv and the oral basar, that he also cannot do the Aveda. Now it's necessary for the Torah to mention that both of these Kainim cannot do the Aveda. I would say if he does not have a bris, mishum demas, that because he physically doesn't have a bris, that's considered to be repulsive for Hashem. The presence of Arla and the physical body of the Kayin, it will prevent him of doing Aveda. Aval Arla Leiv, the fact that it's just his behavior, it's not something mamish physical, so maybe the Lemois, you don't have that repulsive part in his body. Maybe I would say that this is not excluded from him serving. Therefore, it has to say this as well. But v'yashmir and autoleiv, if we would say only the one that is autoleiv, mishum de'ein liboy lashamayim, because his whole behavior, he's estranged to his Father in heaven. Avar autol basar, but one that does not have a bris, the liboy lashamayim, he does not have a bris, but he's still keeping Torah mitzvahs otherwise. Eime loy, I would say he's not excluded of serving the Beis HaMikdash. Tzrichi, therefore it's necessary for the pasuk to say this as well, that he cannot serve in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, I think we're going to stop over here today because the Gemara continues here. One sugya that continues on to Daf Chav Gimel.
Okay.